We are so pleased to welcome our speaker for this evening, and Dr. DeLustro will do that in just a few moments. But as we gather together in this space, I want to ask the students this. We have had our guest speaker in the Chowan room, which if you have not seen it, recently underwent all kinds of painting and renovation. We moved the piano out into the cafeteria and people were playing it this evening, and we encourage everyone to do that. And we also now bring her into Marks Hall. So I guess we should decide where we want to take her next, because that will be the next building to be painted and brought up to speed, right, ladies and gentlemen? So where does she need to go next, students? White's. Where else? Library. Women's soccer locker room. Boy, now that's getting specific, right? Which specific locker, girls? No, in all sincerity, we are so delighted to have our illustrious speaker here this evening, and I am actually going to refer to her as Stephanie because that is what she asked us to do. Folks, I hope you realize that you are here at a very special time indeed for Chowan University. I hope that some of you might have your blue wristband on, and here we are with plans to prosper at a time such as this, when we all come together and we think about the past, we learn from it, we enjoy the present, the gift of today and where we are, but we also have plans to prosper for the future. We learn so much. We learn so much from each other. We learn so much from the stories that we collect, but we learn even more from the stories we tell. That is the basis of this lecture series. That is the idea behind what it is that we will learn from tonight's special guest and that we have learned for more than 3 decades from the noteworthy authors and the folks who have left their mark, not only in the literary world, but indeed on Chowan University. I've told you this before, students, and I tell you again this evening, the name Hobson is not just a name in a history book, because we are delighted to have members of the Hobson family here visiting with us from California for this lecture series. Please welcome them back to Chowan University. I see our students continuing to come in, and I hope they will continue to do so. I'm sure that Dr. Watts will not worry about any type of interruptions, nor will she mark you tardy if you come in just a bit late. I will say that Dr. Watts was to be escorted by her husband and her son this evening, but the fact is her son is quite an accomplished musician and had a performance this evening and was going to surprise his mother with a solo performance, which she will be watching virtually as soon as we can. I want to give a shout out to Jason Fowler. We had a couple of students who asked us about this. One specifically had to leave to go take care of a friend who got stranded on the side of the road and said, "Please tell me it's going to be recorded." To which I immediately turned to Jason Fowler and said, "Please tell me this can be recorded." And indeed it can, and it will. With that, Dr. DeLustro, I'll turn this over to you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this evening.
I'd first like to begin by inviting Dr. Watts to the microbiology lab. Stephanie Powell Watts is the 31st recipient of the Hobson Prize for Distinguished Achievement in Arts and Letters. Born in the picturesque foothills of North Carolina, Dr. Powell holds a PhD from the University of Missouri and a BA from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. She resides in Pennsylvania with her husband and son, where she serves as professor and the Robert D. Rodale Chair in Writing at Lehigh University. Dr. Powell Watts is an acclaimed author. Her debut story collection, We're Only Taking What We Need, earned her the Ernest J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence and was named one of the Oprah magazine's best summer reads in 2013. Her short fiction has been featured in 2 volumes of the Best New Stories of the South anthology and has been honored with a Pushcart Prize. Her debut novel, No One Is Going to Save Us, was the winner of the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work. It tells the story of a successful native son returning to his North Carolina roots in an attempt to join the family he's always longed for but never had. As Dr. Powell Watts herself describes it, imagine the Great Gatsby set in rural North Carolina 9 decades later with desperate Black people. Her writing explores the lives of African Americans in the South, working in fast food and factory jobs, serving as Jehovah's Witness ministers, and navigating the complexities of life in the post-integration South. Please join me in welcoming a truly remarkable writer, Stephanie Powell Watts.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and thank you, everyone, for such a warm, lovely welcome. I feel so embraced by the community and embraced by you. Thank you so much, and to the Hobson family, it's such a joy to have this prize, the Mary Frances Hobson Prize, and I was very surprised to learn that I'm a professor at Lehigh University, and they are Lehigh alums. Sandra and Charles Hobson are Lehigh alums, and what a gratifying thing to see students go in the world and do well and do good, and it's a lovely thing for me as a Lehigh professor, and also just in my capacity here as with the Hobson Prize. So thank you so much. And Provost Delistro, thank you. I know there have been so many things. I know these kinds of visits take a lot of planning, and I really appreciate all your work with that. I want to talk for just a couple of seconds about writing and where my work comes from. And one of my goals last summer was to read everything that James Baldwin ever wrote. And Baldwin's not been out of favor, but his writing is enjoying a renewed interest in recent years. So some of you may have seen the documentary I'm Not Your Negro. It was a critical and commercial success. And If Beale Street Could Talk was Baldwin's 5th novel, and it was made into a film by Barry Jenkins. Baldwin has been part of the current conversation, and I just wanted to read everything that he ever published. And I decided to start with this book called No Name in the Street. And this is nonfiction. It's a book about the late 60s. And on one of the first pages, Baldwin remembers when he was about 5 or 6, and his mother said to no one in particular, while she was reaching up into a closet, she pulled down this scrap of black velvet, and she said, "I have an idea." And little James Baldwin says that for years he thought an idea was a scrap of black velvet. I love that scene, I love that moment for a couple of reasons. One is that we are very influential on each other. We are influential for our children, of course, but also for our friends, other adults, people who see us out in the world. And a pernicious or strange idea, or especially an injury, can stay with us for years, if not a lifetime. The other lesson is about the writer and the importance of images, how an image like that black velvet can focus and gel a moment. It makes it real to us. All of a sudden we see that moment in its particularity. So I just want to talk just for a couple of seconds about some of the influences that feel like that scrap of black velvet to me. The first is The Great Gatsby. It's celebrating its 100th year this year, and the book had a lukewarm reception when it was first published, but it has endured and has captured the imagination of readers and writers for generations. In World War II, the troops were sent 150,000 copies, and so that whole generation kind of grew up reading The Great Gatsby. And there have been at least 5 Hollywood movies telling this story. I saw The Great Gatsby in 3D. Maybe some of you saw The Great Gatsby in 3D, which is kind of something I never thought I'd say. But this work is completely different from my work, but my novel, No One Is Coming to Save Us, counts as The Great Gatsby one of its main influences. All Western literature is a story of migration and attempt to get back there, from Homer's Odyssey and Penelope scheming to try to get Ulysses back, to try to have him back in the fold, to Mohsen Mohammed's East-West, to Jesmond Ward's Sing Unburied Sing. Our literature is about people wanting to find, to get back to, and discover home. My work is also about this. It's about the quiet collisions of everyday life, of class, of race, of gender. The kind of stories I write are about the strangeness of home, the strangeness of every day. I think reading and writing are hopeful acts ultimately. We do both to explain the world to us, to explain ourselves to ourselves. We need stories to recommit ourselves to a time and a place and to reinforce our shared humanity. We are all here on the planet at the same time. It's fascinating and illuminating to fill in the gaps of what we know about each other. No one is coming to save us is about that every day, and mostly about the domestic sphere, the sphere that women typically know. I don't think that F. Scott Fitzgerald wanted to write about women. In fact, he said in a letter to his editor, Maxwell Perkins, that he probably should have written Gatsby from the point of view of women, that it might have sold better. But he was writing about the person on the outside trying desperately to get on the inside. Gatsby is a story about loving the rich, but at the same time rejecting them before they reject you. It's a story about trying to love who you are, and about the desperate lengths and depths we all go through to try to get somewhere and not be that outsider. But Gatsby is also about the seeker's earnest attempt to find a place in the changing world. My writing, what I'm hoping for in my writing is that it will showcase women like me, women like my mother, my grandmothers, women who feel sometimes trapped by their ignorance of the world, by their own bodies, by the rule of men. My women aimed for escape, not the literal confines of the South, not the literal South, but to escape. These are the women who stayed in the South, but they wanted to escape the confines of their history and of their own brains, their own thinking. Like the teenagers who read Gatsby, I was taken with the parties, the glamour, the beautiful people, the love story, the idea that someone would remember you forever, come back for you forever, no matter how far away they were. But what stuck with me about that novel is the language, about the great longing of the characters. Gatsby becomes a new person. He sheds all vestiges of his former life. No longer is he Gats. He is Jake Gatsby. He is a man without a past. The women in my writing can't reinvent in the same way, but they are no less complicated. I'm interested in the stories that weren't told by these mostly silent women. What does their American dream look like? In one version of the American dream, we get to erase the past, who your parents were, what they didn't have, where you come from. In this exciting America, we are in a state of becoming. The problem that Jake Gatsby discovered is that the very second that we blot out, cover over, or ignore the past is the same second the past takes on new significance. What the past means then becomes even more important. So many of us from immigrant families, recent or not, from families of color, from religious minorities, are told your life is not your life, not entirely. What you do reflects on all of us, and you are the keeper of our story. The past then can't be tragic. It's just a chapter in a larger story, a way for our ancestors to overcome, even if that triumphant story did not come in time for them to see it. So on the one hand, the American dream says, you're a new creation, but the pull of identity consciousness says, your life is not your life. This tension of wanting to be an untethered American and wanting to acknowledge deep emotional and spiritual inheritance is a central tension and an animating factor in what I'm trying to write. Another of the things that I wrestle with is religion. I was once a Jehovah's Witness during my adolescence and early adulthood. I went door to door in the evenings after school and on weekends, and a lot during the summer. I'm not a Jehovah's Witness anymore. I do lean toward the Friends and the Quaker faith, but I'm grateful for that background. There's so many positives from having a religious foundation. Religion is the mother lode for a world of symbol and metaphor. A lake of fire is both literal and mental anguish. A many-headed beast, like from Revelation, is fearsome and scary, but also a way to depict the incredible trials of difficult life. Ecclesiastes from the Old Testament tells us that what has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again, because there's nothing new under the sun. Religion reinforces this idea and prepares us for it. But maybe more importantly, religion also opens us up to a world of mystery and the unexplained. Not everything has ready answers. Not everything can fit in the world of order and logic. Since characters are stand-ins for real people, this understanding is at the heart of fiction writing. Accepting that characters can only be somewhat known is that life can sometimes be lucky or sometimes be cruel, that a love, a loss, an ordinary day might be determined by coincidence is crucial to a riveting story. Knowing that there are things that you can never fully and really understand is the beginning of imaginative thinking. It leaves an opening for the imaginary and is vital for any kind of artist. All of these ideas, Gatsby, the American dream, the push and pull of family, and religion are like those scraps of velvet to me, immediately evocative and full of meaning that ignites my thinking. Fiction writers really rarely have time to read a whole story, because nobody wants to sit to hear a whole story. That's a very long time. But I wanted to try to read a very short story that I'm working on. As I mentioned earlier today, as I see some familiar faces, this is a story that, at least the nugget of the story was told to me by my mother. And so I wanted to embellish on that story and think about how it might have been a little bit different. This is a story that I heard as a child in Lenore, North Carolina. This weekend, my mother told me a story she'd never told me before. She was a girl, a young woman really, but we called them girls, and she needed a ride home. They had forgotten her again. Two young men, we'll call them boys, appeared in their dirty car on the street where she was waiting. Her own mother's words rang in her ears. Don't get into a car with a group of boys. Is two a group? She thought. She wasn't sure. But these were boys she knew, one of them well. In a small town, no one is that far from your knowledge. Everyone is someone you know, a cousin, someone's tired uncle, some family known to you or to your family. And she was stranded, forgotten again, after a day of working in a white woman's home. A day's labor for $1 or $2. That was the going rate. Most middle-class families could afford her labor, and this lady needed someone to iron, because she could, she had my mother iron everything, from napkins and pillowcases to underwear. My mother hesitated before she replied to the boys. The driver asked her if she wanted a ride or not. Irritation laced his voice, and that sealed the deal. She knew better than to annoy a waiting man. She pretended to attend to something on her dress, but soon, she opened the car door and sat lightly on the back seat like a skittish cat. She would be safe. Surely she would be safe. Besides, my grandmother was no reliable source. She was mean. She was eaten up by the trials of her own life, her ugly circumstances, her great jealousy of the relatively easy lives of her own daughters. She was no one's trustworthy. My mother closed the car door. The back seat smelled of rot from the yellowed upholstery, and a thin layer of dust from the open windows covered her. The boys, no doubt, riding too fast on the dirt roads around the hills where they lived, had kicked it up into the car. The humps of the leather seat indented obscenely into her thighs like fingers on the back of her thin cotton dress. The ride was usual. It was nearly dark, and the landscape sped by the way it always does. Tops of trees whipped past like blurred images in a dream. In no time at all, it was dark and the car stopped. My mother was at the end of a dirt road. That's where her house sat. She opened the door quickly. She'd arrived. Nothing had happened. The boys concerned themselves with their own conversation. She was no more important than furniture. Nothing she'd been afraid of, nothing she'd even imagined had come to pass. Thanks, she tossed behind her and rushed away from the car. She felt the boys watch her walk through the dusty road, through the patchy yard of her house yards away. Night had come early, and no streetlights shone out there in the boondocks in this weed-ravaged country. The house was dark on the front side. No windows were on this basement house, And slowly over decades, the cinder blocks would grow and there would be rooms, but not today. My mother's bushes and trees in the yard were black cutouts. Her eyes had to adjust to remember. There was little rhyme to the placement of the bushes. Everything in the yard was an afterthought of my grandmother's capricious gardening. Nobody ever thinks about what they plant, how in decent soil, the tree that looks like a stick today, a nothing twig, will someday take over the yard, block out the light, roots bursting through the concrete, splayed limbs across the roof will bang my judgment at the first good wind. The windows of the car were down, and my mother knew she heard them laugh. A few of their words were swallowed by the night, but she distinctly remembered hearing, "Let's get her." The driver, the one my mother knew best, had said it. She will remember him saying it forever, and she will never forget him saying it. There is a calculus of an ordinary day. For example, how much effort, in what direction, and how long will it take me to iron my own damn pillowcases? How much time and energy and effort would it take to thin out those bushes, weed between them, sow seed for grass in the patchy yard? How much time and energy and stamina will it take to get in the car and drive to the lady's house to get the girl? Apparently too much, apparently more than anyone cared to manage. What is the potential of that energy? Will the girl find her way? Will she make it? How much trouble, how broken would we be if she didn't at all? All of these combinations remain out there on the event horizon. All of these parts of this daily map that help us determine our own equations for survival. My mother calculated she would never reach her door unseen or uncaught. She knew it. She could not outrun the boys. And in that boondocks woods, no soul would pass along the road to see a car or hear a skinny young girl. My mother ducked in the bushes beside the house. There were no flowers yet bloomed, but weeds, so many weeds. Weeds my grandmother had let be to live as they pleased. "Where is she?" she heard one of them say. The boys rushed around the house, away from her, going the wrong other way to the half-brick side of my grandmother's house. "Shit," the boy said to the other. Maybe it was the boys' lack of attention, their lack of will for anything too hard. Maybe they tired of the chase, the game no longer exciting. Or do we dare hope that they suffered just a moment? Imagine for a second that cruelty is not a game, and there is no play in the terror of a defenseless girl. Whatever happened, whatever they felt, they got back into the car. My mother heard them pull off and away, and she did not move until she heard them on the blacktop. How long before someone came from the house? Someone would have to come to the outhouse eventually. Or maybe my grandmother, in a fit of melancholy, would come out to look at the moon, or yell into the well, or wish on a star, or begin to, maybe start to, until she reminded herself for the 1,000th time that there is no such thing as fulfilled wishes. Even the stars in the sky shined their visible light days, weeks, eons ago. Your opportunity to wish always well past. When and only when my mother heard the whine and yawl of the creaky door on its hinge and the footsteps of a loved one, or at least someone more familiar, only then would she rise up out of the bushes, brush off her dress, and pick the leaves from her hair. She had not realized that she had been crying. She should stop. You have to stop. Stop it. You are as safe as you will ever be. Thank you. Thank you. So what do you want to talk about? Yes.
Why did they send those Great Gatsby to soldiers fighting the war? I can't think of anything more depressing than Gatsby floating in that swimming pool with blood soaking everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, one, they had a surplus. They were in a warehouse. They thought, I mean, Fitzgerald was one of the biggest writers in the world in 1925, and they thought this is gonna be amazing. It's gonna be huge. And it fizzled for some reason. I think maybe the winds of the Depression were starting up, and people didn't want to read about people just wasting a lot of money on extravagant. I don't know, but it didn't do as well as they thought it would. So they had them. The other thing I think is short. You know, it's a slim book, and so if it had been 400 pages, I think that might have been more intimidating to somebody. And I think too the kind of message of the story is kind of lovely. Because people don't really remember so much about spoiler alert. I won't say it, but people don't remember the negative parts too much. They remember the love story and the big parties and them Gatsby finally finding Daisy, and I think that is what was the draw. That this is a love story and you are not forgotten, even if you're away, and even if it takes us years. We'll get back to you. I think those three things combined. Then there was Lionel Trilling was an incredibly important and influential critic, and he championed Gatsby too. So I think that helped. But it didn't flop. It didn't totally flop. It just wasn't a big hit like they thought it would be. And I think that combination of things got them to send the books overseas. Has everybody read it? It's totally worth reading. Yes.
It's a great movie.
Yes.
Your character in your story is, I guess it's the darkness around her that really found compelling. You want to talk about that? That's kind of what you talked about in your introduction too, about being lost, finding ourselves, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, yes, thank you. I think there's so much in American literature about the kind of striving outsider and the very individual impulse. How can I figure this out myself? And so many characters we see in those spaces, that it's me against the world and I've got to figure out how to do this. And we don't often see women like this in those spaces. And so I wanted to write that kind of moment. It is, and there is a mood with this moment. And when my mother was telling me about this story, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure how that story ended. When she's telling me it ended as well as it could have, but I'm not 100% sure how that story ended. And so I wanted that feeling through this story that there's this foreboding and that some kind of personal tragedy was going to occur. Thank you. Yes.
Why do you think the relationship in the book between Sylvia and Marcus was so important?
I do. Sylvia is one of my favorite characters that I've ever written, and I think partly because she's so tough and she has such the toughness is real. It's not just superficial. She has such stamina, and she's going to make it, but she is hurting inside. And there's really not anyone that she can make that connection with, that she can talk to about that, that she can kind of relieve her burden. And so she finds somebody in a very unlikely place, and it allows her to be herself, because she's a tough lady, but it allows her to have some of that nurturing quality that she wants to have, and it allows her to interact with a boy like she might interact with her own boy. And so that became really, really important to her, to be in that space with somebody, and that helped heal her. I think that I think sometimes when we don't have what we need, and a lot of us are, probably most of us don't get everything that we need in this life from, even sometimes from the people we really need it from. Sometimes if one, and including characters, can fill that need at least partly by doing the thing. If you weren't nurtured enough as a kid, then if you nurture, it helps heal somehow. And I think that that's what she's experiencing. That she can get some of what she's after by enacting it with someone else. It's not a complete remedy, but it's something, and it allows her a little bit of reprieve from the overwhelming grief that she's feeling. So, thank you.
At what point did you find your passion for writing?
I think I have always been a writer. I think I always wanted to be a writer. I'm a first generation college student. My father worked at Bernhardt. Well, he worked at a couple of the plants in Lenore, North Carolina, for many years. And his dream was that I would go to school. But when you're a first generation college student, maybe some of you are, you want to do something practical. You can't risk it. You can't risk doing something that might not succeed. And so, as I was saying earlier, my first degree, or my first major, was in accounting, because I thought that's great. I can move forward with that. But that was not for me. And so, they don't like, in accounting, they don't want you to say it's about $300. They don't like that. They frown on that a lot. So, so I really had to find a path, and I thought I will go into the professorate, because I love students, I love teaching, and I will be a writer, kind of on the side. So, but I've always wanted to do it. I've always thought, I've always wanted to translate the world through words. That I see something, it's really exciting or interesting, and I've always wanted to put it down and try to work through and think about what it is. And I don't think that you have to be, a professional writer or to look for publication or anything like that to do that. I think there are a lot of people, my mother was one, a lot of people who just love it. And if nobody ever read it aside from, her children, she doesn't care. She just enjoys the whole process and thinking about the world in that way. And so that's what I assumed I would do. And then I just kept going with it. And, then my father really wanted me to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And, I had to break his heart that way too. So, but the professorate was a way for me to think about, okay, I could do this. I could be in a university, college or university, and I could still have the things that I really loved, and I could kind of combine the things that I loved. Thank you. Yes.
Do you have a story that reflects upon your life, or that correlates to your story of just living in the world? And if so, what is it about?
Like a fictional story?
I mean, yeah, with characters, whatever. Like just
Oh,
one
you
that
mean
you
like
correlate to yourself or to your life, or that reflects you the most.
I'm not sure if I have one that reflects me the most, but I do have a few of them. I mean, one is there's a story in here called Unassigned Territory, and as I was mentioning, I used to be a Jehovah's Witness, and so if you know about that religion, you know that there is a kind of mission that is door to door, that is local. You go around to people's homes, and there also, especially if you live in a rural place, there are also places that are not on the grid, so to speak. That they're way out in the woods, that kind of thing. And those people, they are not visited very often because people can't get out there, and that's called unassigned territory. And so I don't know that this is is entirely me. There's something about it that is about my experience, but it's not autobiographical exactly. But I just had this, I wanted to believe and I wanted to be a believer, but I wasn't sure about this. And so wrestling with that is part of what this story is about. And thinking about, well, who am I as a person of God? What do I think about the world and what I think about going through the world and trying to be a good person? What does that mean? And so that's kind of wrestling with that is part of that story. And that's been a big question for me in thinking about who I am and who I want to be in relation to other people. So that's one of them. I had to think about that too. There are others. Yes.
What's the biggest risk you've ever taken, and was it worth the risk?
I've taken a few risks. I would say that if there's something that doesn't disquiet you as a moral person, and that's something that you feel like this will be for my good, or the good of others, I think it's worth a risk. I tell my students all the time, if it's not immoral or illegal, try it. You've never been on a roller coaster, do it. Why not? See what it's about. You've never been to such and such a place, why not? Do it. And I think it deepens and strengthens your imaginative capacity. So I think it's a good thing to do. So I would say I haven't done things that I feel like kind of erase my moral code or make me feel like I have been morally compromised. Then I would probably regret those. But the things that I've done that didn't work out so well, I kind of feel like they're okay. I needed to learn something from that. If you go somewhere and you think, oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it was, well, then you know something. It's information. You can use it in your life and think about how you're going to move forward and how you move forward as an artist and as a person. So, I'm thinking, is there anything that I truly regret? And I don't. I always say I have a 15-year-old son who turned 15 2 weeks ago, and I can't change anything. There's no butterfly effect. I can't change anything because he might not come to me, and I could not risk that, not any leaf, not any flower, nothing, because he might not be here with me. So no regret, nothing. Oh, sorry.
One of the opportunities or challenges, depending on which side you see it, of college writing is the use of AI.
Mm-hmm.
How do you empower or discourage students to apply it?
I feel like that AI has a place, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, something about AI, and it's a tool, and we should use it as a tool. What we do as artists and writers and painters and photographers, what we do cannot be supplanted by AI, because AI says, hey, let me look at everything that's out there and try to figure it all out and come up with something. And what we're trying to do is say, hey, there's something that's out there, but through this consciousness. Nobody thinks like you. Nobody's had your experiences. Nobody has your brain. So you cannot replicate. You can replicate some of the kind of general emotion. You can't replicate that experience. And so I want students to use AI as a tool. I think it's a great idea. And to think about, if you're trying to say, write me a poem about love, teenage love, and then you'll see exactly what to avoid, the kind of cliche, the things that everybody will say, that kind of thing. What you're trying to do is to say something that comes through you about teenage love, not necessarily your personal experience, but that comes through your brain. And so I think we need to do that. We need to be prepared to use AI and use AI in all kinds of ways. but as a tool and not to supplant what we're trying to do and what we're thinking. Because AI can do a perfectly reasonable job of writing that poem, but it won't be good. It won't, and it will not have the print of the human heart. It just won't have it, and that's what we're looking for. Yes.
What would be a good advice that you give to like young writers or someone who wants to start writing, but they're like too afraid or just don't know where to start?
Yeah, this fear is palpable. It gets under your skin. It makes you stop doing the things that you want to do. It's for real. I'm not at all. I'm not one of those kind of people that say, oh, that's nothing. It's something. It's hard. But if you can convince yourself to do a little bit, then you can overcome it. You have to face it though. You have to get up in the morning or whatever and look at it and say, I know who you are. I know why you're here. And I don't want you to be here. I'm glad that you're here to tell me what I need, because that's what fear is doing. It's telling you what you need. And it's getting into those weird spaces that you don't want to get into. It's doing that for you. I mean, it doesn't want to do that for you, but it's doing that for you. And so shake hands, I appreciate why you're here, but we're not doing that today. And it's really hard. I'm not downplaying how hard it is, but think about it in these tiny increments. Don't try to do the whole thing, just these tiny moments, and you can move forward that way. But it can get all in your thinking, it can get in your bones, and then you're like, I'm not gonna think about that, and then it's like 4 months and you haven't written a word, that happens a lot. And I have many friends that I went to graduate school with, only a few of them are still writing, and partly because of fear and partly because they're like, I'm never going to be very good, or those sorts of things. And I hate that. That's a really crushing thing. So it can happen. It can happen to anybody. So you have to get on top of it and just scoop out a little bit every day.
Because you're such an accomplished, author and all of that, professor to professor, do your students fear you grading them?
Oh no, they know I'm a pushover. No. It's I'm doing an advanced class right now, and I have people doing big projects, and there's a couple of novellas and novels and collections of stories. It's really exciting, and I mean I think it's crazy to be cruel to people when they're trying to be artists. When you have a little thing, when you have a baby, when you have a seedling, you have to be really careful with it. Little things are fragile. You don't play around with that. And people's dreams are fragile, and you don't mess with that. You say, look, this, you don't lie, because if you lie, that's not helpful. You say, this is working. Let's think about this. Tell me what you're thinking. Let's try to get what you're thinking out here on the page. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you do, but you don't slam people. That it's a cruelty, and you can really stun people for a long time. I mean, I was at a conference at Sewanee, and somebody told me that her advisor said, "You're never going to publish anything." Who says that to their student? What a cruel thing to do, and that sets you back, or it can set you back forever. But it set her back, and of course it did. It's a horrible thing to do to somebody. And so I just think about, not trying to be, everything is fine and that's not good either. But to say, here's what's working, and let's think about that. How do we make this thing grow? And even now, I don't want people telling me, that's boring, or please don't write anymore, or I don't want that. That's just mean, So even I've been doing it for a while, but still, that's hurtful. And why?
I'm sure they love that.
So much stress. Any other?
Good evening, everyone. So, on behalf of students here at Chowan University, I'm honored to present you with a small token of appreciation
Thank you.
for sharing your insights, your experience, and your education knowledge with us. And you truly inspired all of us tonight.
Oh,
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
here.
Hi everyone. If you'd please pray with me, and if you'd like, please join hands with somebody as I pray. Lord, we just want to thank you for this evening. We want to thank you for Miss Stephanie for gracing us with her presence and gracing her with her inspirational words and just her insight on her experiences and everything that she's done. We want to thank Dr. Thomas and Dr. DeLestro for allowing this event to be for us to just indulge in the experience and be a part of everything that Chowan has to offer. We thank you for all the upgrades to this room and the Chowan room, and we thank you for everything that you have for the future. I want to thank everyone that was able to come out tonight and just appreciate things that some people aren't able to do, and that we can all just be a part of and indulge in. We want to pray for people being able to take risks going into the next chapter of their lives, people graduating in May, and we really just want to take this time to appreciate you and giving us everything that life has to offer us. With that, I just want to say thank you again. Thank you, Miss Stephanie, for being here with us this evening.